So our annual theme for 2025 is Rising Higher, Growing Deeper, and our theme for the month of February is Radical Interdependence. Radical interdependence. I had a teacher, you might know her, Reverend Penny Masick, just beat interdependence into us on her team, that this idea of trying to do everything individually and standing entirely in one's own space is not only unrealistic, but it is unkind to the people around us and eventually deteriorates the capacity to create community. And for this, bootstrapping Midwesterner, it took me a minute. I'm still working on it. And it becomes clearer and clearer to me as we look around at the world that we're in right now, that radical interdependence is our path forward. It is our path forward. I've gotten the same question over and over for the last, 3 weeks. And it sounds something like this. How are we supposed to do this? And there are various forms of this, right? But how are we supposed to do this? How are we supposed to walk around as modern spiritual people in the world and see whatever mess you're particularly focused on in the moment? There are plenty to go around. And be upright and functional and speaking and connecting and doing our jobs and curling our hair or whatever we do. How am I supposed to act like this is how life is? How? And I hear you so deeply. And please know, I'm in the same questions. Personally, I'm in the same questions. And what I know for sure about this beloved body of people here in the Tatum campus, people here in the online campus, is that at some level, we feel called to be a positive presence on the inside of ourselves and out in the world. Yes? We feel the awareness that there is a more loving way, a more communal way, a more powerful way for this world to walk its way out, and we feel drawn from the inside of ourselves somehow that we are supposed to be leading the pack. And a whole bunch of us are like, okay, ready to go. Where are we going? Could somebody please tell me where we're going to go? And shy of just listening to black women on TikTok, which I'm not minimizing that, definitely do that. I too am kind of like, and then I remember, oh dear Lord, given my job, I'm really the one who's supposed to be telling them where to go. Was not aware that that's what I was signing up for. Except I was. So what do? How do we prepare ourselves to send ripples out into the world that impact the way life works in our in our family systems, in our communities, and on the planet? How do we do that when so many of us are feeling various forms of frozen? I don't think I'm overstating when I say there are those among us in terror. Yeah. And so step one is just owning it on the inside of yourself. Wherever you are energetically, just be clear about it. It's okay if it looks messy. Newsflash, life is messy. Life starts messy. If you have been privileged enough to be in a delivery room or in someone's home when they're giving birth, tidy is not the word I would use to describe that experience. So we are where we are, and so what can we look to and how can we set ourselves up to be mindful enough to be part of the putting ripples into the water that start to shift the energy. So the first thing I want to look for is, what does Centers for Spiritual Living have to say about it? So Centers for Spiritual Living is the, I call it the mothership, if you will. It's the denominational umbrella under which we sit as part of a New Thought group. And conveniently, they have thoughts about this. There is what they call the global vision of Centers for Spiritual Living, and it is a world that works for everyone. Creating and sustaining a world that works for everyone. Isn't that lovely? We can all go, oh, that's so nice. I'm so happy to be part of an organization that wishes to create a world that works for everyone. And then the voice of my dear beloved friend, Sonia Byrne, comes into my head, and she says, what the hell does that even mean? Everyone? What if they want different things that are mutually exclusive? And what if this person's idea of a world that works for them involves killing that person? Who is everyone, and how do you do that? I would like an outline. This is what Sonia would say. I would like an outline. And that is why she becomes a person that runs whole multinational organizations, and I'm just here, where it's lovely and we're having a great time. So when I start thinking about this idea of a world that works for everyone, there is so much subjectivity built into that statement. And how do we start to pick apart the subjectivity? And I think about stories. The morality and the wisdom of our world is held in story. And we can tell a lot about a culture or a religion or a space in time based on what stories they told. And sometimes those stories travel through millennia and multiple cultures. Like, take the Bible. Millennia and multiple cultures, right? But we can find what each body of people is valuing in the moment based on which stories they tell, based on which characters they exemplify in those stories. When we think about the Bible, I mean, how many people know beloveds who say, well, I'm Bible-based, I live by the Bible? I sure do. I've got tons of people in my life that live that way. And at times in my life, I have been one who has lived that way. And it's a wonderful body of work. There's amazing stuff in there. And I didn't live by all of it. I never called bears to eat anyone. That's in there. Children were being mean to a man because he was bald. And so he prayed to God, and God sent bears to eat the children. I have genuinely never planned my day based on that story. And probably nobody has, but it's in there, so somebody thought it was important at some point. We can tell who is valued and who isn't in a culture based on which stories they are telling. We can tell what they think is moral and amoral based on which stories they are telling. And we can tell when people start emphasizing certain passages versus other passages where they're at in the world. And yet, every one of those people that's turning to the same body of work, whether it's the Quran or the Talmud or the newspaper, would say, I'm just following the truth. I heard it on the news. I'm just telling you what is true. But you change the channel, and oh my gosh, the story is completely different. And you change the channel again, and now who did what? Why are the astronauts still on the space station? It's been like 9 months. You turn the channel, the astronauts are perfectly happy on the space station. They don't know why we're making a big deal of it. Oh. So step 2 is to realize, what stories am I telling? Meaning is made by people. Nothing is objective truth. Scientific studies are not objective truth because who did they test? Who made up those questions? What were they hoping to show? Why were they hoping to show that? Who wanted funding for what drug? Who didn't want to put the dam in because it would change the land where they owned property? Nothing is objective. Nothing is objective. It's all about who's telling the story and why. Since meaning is made by people, and people are meaning-making machines, ooh, we're good at it. Ooh, I can make up a whole story about how Celeste said the thing because she thinks that I am too fill in the blank. And then she wanted she got people to gang up on me. Now they all think I'm fill in the blank. They're all against me. Or I could just know Celeste. She's just being Celeste. She's my vocab buddy. We both like really big words, and when one of us uses a particularly good word, the other one goes, and it doesn't mean anything about me, and it doesn't mean anything about Celeste. We're meaning-making machines, but it doesn't mean that we're good at it. And every once in a while, we need to check in with ourselves, check in with our stories. Do they fit? Are we ready to let it go? Are we ready to open up? So part of being able to check in with those stories is in getting mindful. And mindful is one of those words that I go, because it can mean like 600,000 things. And unless we're talking about the same thing, there's no point me being up here, right? So I turned to, at the advice of a dear friend, I turned to the work of Daniel J. Siegel, who is a therapist for children and also a neurobiologist. And he talks a lot in his work about mindfulness and awareness and sort of this conjunction of intelligence and consciousness and how to be the people we wish to be in such a way that it's meaningful and joy building within ourselves. And he talks in his book, The Mindful Brain, he says, the idea here is if we're going to be mindful about how we're showing up in the world, we can look at this acronym COAL, C-O-A-L. And this is what COAL stands for. Curiosity, inquiry without being judgmental. Openness, having the freedom to experience what is occurring as simply the truth without need to make judgments or stories out of it. Acceptance, taking as a given the reality of and the need to be precisely where you are, experiencing precisely what you're experiencing in that moment. And then love, being kind, compassionate, and empathetic to others and to yourself. In Science of Mind, we would consider this kind of mindfulness, this curiosity, openness, acceptance, and love, as a form of practicing the presence. Because if we are right where we ought to be, open and experiencing what is free of judgment, in that is the divine. Yes? In that is the divine. So I invite you to go in your mind back to whatever place you last were in your experience when you said, what the? I'm willing to bet it was within the last few days. To the best of your ability, take yourself back to that space. Dylan, we're going back to that space in our mind. Ah, oh, beautiful. And see if you can connect with that feeling tone of curiosity. It's okay if you weren't there in that moment. That's totally fine. Curiosity, without judgment. What's going on here on the inside of me and on the outside of me? Openness, a willingness to just experience it. Acceptance, an active not making it wrong in that moment, that there is a reason you are there and it is valuable. And then open up to that place of interior love. And then see if you can expand it, expand that bubble of love, how far you can include it. Unskilled behavior comes from pain. The world is full of unskilled behavior right now. Can you hold compassion for it? Can you do that? And as you're ready, I invite you to bring your consciousness back into this physical experience we're having together. So with that awareness, with that mindfulness, that mindful awareness is what Dan Siegel would call it, we get to this idea of making ripples. And I'm going to lovingly invite you to consider joining me in the intention to not cannonball in and send shockwaves of water over everyone, like, this is the way it is. I said it's an invitation. And pulling back to this idea of how do we do ripples? Because change usually comes gently. An invitation to potentially a different way of seeing it. A little bit more information. Connection to people who might be impacted by unfoldments. And we open slowly. I don't know if I have ever changed my mind based on somebody screaming in my face about how it should be. Maybe you have. I'm open to all possibilities. But most people do better in the ripples. So how do we really start setting ourselves up to put ripples into the world that could meaningfully make change? Mindfully explore your stories. What stories are you telling right now? Who are you calling stupid, evil? It's an inside activity, but you can giggle if you need to. What are you making very simple that isn't simple? And what are you making very hard that isn't hard? Only you can know that. And in that process, we find our truth. And freedom, capital F, quality of God, freedom, lives in that truth. And it's important that we find our truth. It's easier to be who we really are, when we're in the presence, when we're in that aware mindfulness that allows the space for the divine to fill us up and walk itself out through us, as us, right? We can do that easier when we're in that sense of the presence. And from there, we approach the world with mindfulness. Thich Nhat Hanh, the great, amazing Vietnamese Buddhist teacher who actually is the one, are you ready for this? Coached Martin Luther King on nonviolence, right? The reason we have the story we have, one of many reasons we have the story we have about Martin Luther King is that he worked with Thich Nhat Hanh, and together they birthed this fresh way of being. He said, many of us get swept away by events and situations around us, and by whatever we see and hear. We lose ourselves. This is why we must also cultivate freedom from the crowd. When you have real freedom, even if the crowd is shouting or going in one direction, you can still be yourself. You're not swept away by the emotions of the majority. For us to make meaningful ripples in the world, we have to get out of the echo chamber and out of the lie of inevitability. I'm going to say that again. It's important. We have to get out of the echo chambers and out of the lie of inevitability. Change can't come from there. Change can't come from absolute black-white thinking. We have to allow what we see as definitive to become permeable. And then we have to be willing to permeate. Thank goodness we have the divine to support us in that process. And so this is the invitation when we know that mindfulness in the presence, and only mindfulness in the presence, allows us to be who we are enough to make meaningful ripples. Then the invitation is to take that mindfulness into conscious practice. Curious, open, accepting, loving, in the interior love and the exterior love, in the intrapersonal and the interpersonal. Drip, 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 drip. This is our job. This is what I invite you to join me and millions of others in this day and every day. I hope you are with me, and so it is. Let us anchor this in with some prayer. How good it is to know that the infinite presence is always right where we are, and that we can rest in it, and we do rest in it. To know that this one that we call the divine is everywhere present in this Tatum sanctuary, in the homes and computers of everyone on online campus, in the lives of those who will find this message 7 years from now on YouTube. The divine is right there, every moment, all the time. Not because we go to a center for spiritual living, but because this is the way the universe is built. And so I know infinite spirit in my heart, in the heart of everyone within the sound of my voice, and in every world leader, in every decision maker, in every parent explaining what's happening in the world right now to a 3-year-old. I know that it's present in the hearts and minds of every young person, those who hold the future of life in their heads and hearts, and I know that they are empowered by the infinitude of life itself to create a world that can, in fact, work for everyone and for all of creation. And so I know whatever is on the heart and mind of beloveds within the sound of my voice that feels like it is stopping them from moving forward into a place of divine expansion, that it is gone, that those seeming obstacles are melted in the heart and the mind and the light of the divine truth. That there is freedom here, that there is opening to the presence right here, right now, as we are. And it is good. And so I am just overflowing with gratitude, knowing Spirit is where we are. Spirit is where we are. Spirit is bleeping where we are. And I call it all good. And so it is.